shape our future together. I'm not even looking at the future, I'm looking at the present moment. Present moment is a bit worrying.
We are starting. So Olivier, would you like to start?
I think I should, shouldn't I? It's just my machine is starting as well.
I'm not able to log in. I don't know why.
I'm
but
always
it's taking
on.
so
Don't
much.
tap me, thank you.
Oh, let me remind to everyone here that the mics is always on.
Yep.
So be careful because everyone is listening.
Exactly.
Is it the 25 or 2?
And also, while we wait Olivier's preparations, let me also invite everyone here in the room,
I was
if you
on
want
the
to
other
sit
one,
here,
but
because these seats are free. So if you want to stay closer with us, you will have the benefit of having a mic on and not having to be in line to ask questions at the Q&A moment.
Okay. I think this works. Yes, it does. Okay. Right. Welcome, everybody, to this session, this joint session of the Dynamic Coalition on Core Internet Values and the Dynamic Coalition on Network Neutrality. I'm Olivier Crépin-Leblanc, and co-chair of the Dynamic Coalition, co-chair of this session is going to be Luca Belli for the Dynamic Coalition on Network Neutrality and Pari Esfandiari for the Core Internet Values. It's great to see such a lot of you here. As Luca said, if anybody wants to step up over to the table here, they're very welcome to do so. We are going to have a session that's going to be quite interactive, so we'll have the speakers speak and so on, and then we'll see if we can have a good discussion in the room about the topic. I'm just going to do just a quick introduction of the speakers that we have. And so we'll start with 4 speakers, each providing their angle on the topic. We'll have Vincef, who's joining us remotely. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it in person at this IGF. So he's over in the US, and he will actually let us know at some point when he will be online, because he is also, as often, doing more than one session at the same time.
Actually, I am.
We haven't. We have already.
I am online.
Oh, he's already there. Goodness gracious.
There,
okay,
yes.
Sorry, Vint. I have 2 eyes, but they both look in the same direction. I don't know why. I should have also checked the screen. Vincef, Hadia El-Minyawi, and then we'll have Renata Mieli also here, and Sandrine Elmi-Hersey, who's sitting next to me. After that, we'll have what we call additional speakers. They'll be commenting on what they've heard from the from the first set of speakers. There's 3 commenters, William Drake, Bill Drake, Roxana Radu, and Shoyan Wu, who's just arrived from China, so very last minute managed to make it here. So welcome to all of you. And then after that, we'll open it to a wider discussion. But I'm kind of wasting time. We've only got 75 minutes, so I'm going to hand the floor straight over to Luca and to Pari for the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivia, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here with all of you. So we convene this session, Bridging Internet and AI Governance from Theory to Practice, not just because things are changing fast, but because the way we think about digital governance is being fundamentally reshaped. As technologies converge and accelerate, our governance systems haven't kept up. And at the center of this shift is artificial intelligence. Let's start with theory. The Internet's core value: global, interoperable, open, decentralized, end-to-end, robust and reliable, and freedom from harm. These were not just technical features, but deliberate design choices that made the Internet a global made the internet a global commune for innovation, diversity, and human agency. Now comes generative AI. It doesn't just add another layer to the internet, it introduces a fundamentally different architecture and logic. We are moving from open protocols to centralized models, gated, opaque, and controlled by a handful of actors. AI shifts the internet pluralism towards convergence, replacing inquiry with predictive narration and reducing user agency. This isn't just a technical shift. It's about who gets to define knowledge, shape discourse, and influence decisions. It's a profound governance challenge and a societal choice about the kind of digital future we want. If we are serious about preserving user agency, democratic oversight, and an open, informative ecosystem, the core internet values can serve as signposts to guide us. But it needs active support, updated policies, and cross-sector commitment. This is where the practice begins. The good news is we are not starting from scratch, from UNESCO's AI ethics framework to the EU AI Act, the US AI Bill of Rights, and efforts by Mozilla and others. We are seeing real momentum to root AI governance in shared fundamental values. So yes, there is a real divergence, but also real opportunities to shape what comes next, and that's our focus today. With that, I will hand it over to my co-moderator, Luca Belli. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pari and Olivier, and also let me. Is this working?
Yes.
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 Okay. Thank you. Are you sure? Because I'm not hearing myself. Is this working?
I am hearing.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Can you hear? Okay. I'm sorry. It's my headphone. It's not working. It's not useful when I have to hear myself. Anyway.
Yes.
All right. So thank you very much, Olivier and Pari, for having organized this and for having been the driving force of this session that actually builds upon what we have already done last year in our first joint venture that was already quite successful. And I think that what already emerged, I always say that it's good to build upon the sessions and buildings and building blocks and reports that we have already elaborated so that we move forward, right? And actually something that already emerged as sort of consensus last year in Riyadh are two main points. First is that we have already discussed for pretty much 20 years, at least here at IGF, internet governance and internet regulation. And so we can start to distill some of those teachings and lessons into what we could apply to regulate the evolution of AI and AI governance. And second, and to quote what the expression Vint used last year, the internet and AI are two different beasts. So we are speaking about two things that are two digital phenomenon, but they are quite different. And the internet, as Pari was reminding us very eloquently, has been built on an open, decentralized, transparent, interoperable architecture that made the success of the internet over the past 70 years, 50 years at least, since Vint penned it in 74. But the question here is how we reconcile this with a highly centralized AI architecture. And I think that here there is a very important point we have been working on net neutrality and internet openness debate over the past year, that is the concept of internet generativity, that we have enshrined in the documents, the report we have elaborated here over the past years, which is the capacity of the internet to evolve thanks to the unfiltered contributions of the users, is the consequence of the fundamental core internet values. Openness, transparency is to create a level playing field, a capacity to innovate, to share and use application services, content, to make the internet evolve according to how the users want to do. So users are not only users, passive users, are prosumers. They create the internet. Now, this is in fundamental tension with an AI that is frequently proprietary, non-interoperable, very opaque, both in the data sets that are used for training, that usually are the result of massive scraping of both personal data and copyrighted content in very peculiar ways that might be considered illegal in most countries with data protection or copyright legislation. And then the training and the output of it is very much opaque for the user. And very few companies can do this and supply this. So there is an enormous concentration phenomenon ongoing, which is quite the opposite of what the original internet philosophy was about. Now, to discuss this point, we have a series of fantastic speakers today. I think that, as I was mentioning before, as we are celebrating 51 years of the paper on by Vint and Bob Kahn on the internet networking protocol, and a protocol for internet working networks, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think the first person that should go ahead should be Vint. So Pari, please, the floor is yours to present Vint.
Thank you very much. We have two actually overarching questions, and we would like our speakers to focus on those two overarching questions. I would read it for you. How can the Internet's foundational principles of openness and decentralization guide transparent and accountable AI governance, particularly as generative AI becomes a main gateway to content? And the second question, how can fundamental network neutrality principles such as generativity and competition on a level playing field apply to AI infrastructure, AI models, and content creation? So when drawing on your unique experiences in both funding architecture of the internet and your work with the private sector, we are curious to hear your comments on these questions. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to remind everyone that I am not an expert on artificial intelligence. I barely manage my own intelligence, let alone artificial. But I work with a company that has invested very heavily in AI and in AI-based services, so I can reflect a little bit of that in trying to respond to these very important questions. The first thing that I would observe is that the internet was intended to be accessible to everyone. And I think the AI efforts are reflective of that as well. The large language models, well, let me distinguish between large language models and machine learning tools for just a moment. All of you are well aware that AI has been an object of study since the 1960s. It's gone through several iterations of phases, the most recent of which is machine learning, reinforcement learning, and then large language models. The reinforcement learning mechanisms have given us things like programs that can beat the best players of Go, programs that can tell you how proteins fold up, and that tells us something about their functionality. And more recently, there's something that at Google called Alpha Evolve, which is an artificial intelligence system that will invent other software to solve problems for you. The large language models that we interact with embody huge amounts of content, but they are specialized when they interact with the users. So you use the term prompting to elicit output from these large language models. And the point I want to make here is that every time someone interacts with one of those, they are specializing it to their interests and their needs. So in a sense, we have a very distributed ability to adapt a particular large language model to a particular problem or to respond to a particular question. And that's important. The fact that we are able to personalize our interactions with these sources of information is a very important element of useful access. The question about interoperability of the various machine learning systems is partly answered by the agent model idea. That is to say, the large language models are becoming mechanisms by which we can elicit not only responses, but also actions to be taken. So the so-called agentic generative AI is upon us. And consonant with that are two other standards that are being developed. One is called A2A, or agent-to-agent interaction, and the second one is called MCP, which is a model context protocol that give these artificial intelligence agents a concept of the world in which they're actually operating. The reason these are so important, and they create interoperability among various agentic systems, is that it's very important for precision. It's important that the agents, when they interact with us and when they interact with each other, to have a well-defined context in which that interaction takes place. And we need clarity, and we need confidence that the semantics are matched between the two agents. If anyone has ever played that parlor game called Telephone, where you whisper something in someone's ear and then they whisper in the next person's ear, and you go down the line, and whatever comes out on the other end is almost never what started out at the beginning. We don't want chains of agents to get confused. And so the A2A and MCP are mechanisms to try to make that work a lot better. So I think this is a very important notion for us to ingest into the work of the core internet values, except they will have to become core AI values, which is clarity in interaction among the various agents, of course, among other things. Last point I would make is that as you interact with large language models, the so-called prompting exchanges, one of the biggest questions that we always have is how accurate is the output that we get from these things? We all know about hallucination and the generation of counterfactual output coming from agents. It's very important that provenance of the information that is used by the agents or by the large language models and references be available for our critical thinking and critical evaluation of what we get back. And so once again, that's a kind of core internet value. How do I evaluate, or how can I evaluate the output of these systems to satisfy myself that the content and the response is accurate? So those are just a few ideas that I think should inform the work of these dynamic coalitions as we project ourselves into this online AI environment. Well, I'll stop there because I'm sure other people have many more important things to say in response to these questions.
Thank you very much, Vint, and for that very informative discussion. And with that, I would go to Sandrine. Sandrine, based on your experience shaping digital strategies within government, how would you see this? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first start to say that it's a real pleasure to join this session today and to discuss this important topic with partners from the Net Neutrality and Core Internet Values coalitions. And before we ask how to apply openness and transparency to AI governance, I would like to insist on the why. Why this application has become essential. So, as it was already covered by Vint, LLMs, notably generative AI tools, are becoming a new default point of entry to online content and services for users. Since our conversation at the last IGF at Riyadh, we've been seeing this trend accelerating through the development of the use of individual chatbots, but also the establishment of response engines integrating into mainstream search tools. Generative AI is also increasingly embedded directly in end users' devices. And we are also seeing a shift from early generation LLMs to new RAG, so retrieval augmented generation systems that are now included in AI tools and that can directly draw from the web. And looking ahead, agentic models could also centralize a wide range of users' actions into a single AI interface. So the question is really, will tomorrow's internet still be open, decentralized, and user-driven if most of our online action is mediated by a handful of AI tools? So now, regarding the how, ARCEP, so the French Regulatory Authority for Electronic Communications, is currently conducting technical hearings and field testing with a team of data scientists to explore this very question. Although our report is currently in development, we can already identify 3 main areas for action to apply Internet core values to AI governance. The first area is accelerating on AI transparency, understanding generative AI models, what data they use, how they process information, and what limits they have is a prerequisite for trust. There is some progress. More and more players are now engaging with researchers and through sectorial initiatives such as standards and code of conduct. But many models remain black boxes. We need greater openness, especially to the research community, to improve auditability and explainability, but also the efficiency of models. The second area is preserving the notion of intelligence at the edge of networks, which is the original spirit of the internet, intelligence distributed among users and applications, not centralized in platforms or infrastructure. And we must notably ensure that users remain able to choose among diverse services and sources. This may require working on the technical and economic conditions that shape AI outputs to guarantee a certain level of neutrality, plurality of views, and openness to a diverse range of content creators and innovators. Last but not least, regarding the principle of non-discrimination that is also at the center part of net neutrality. So net neutrality, non-discrimination principle was originally applied to prevent internet services providers from privileging their own services or partners in vertical markets. But today's ISPs are not the only digital gatekeepers that can narrow the perspective and freedom of choice of end users. So at ARCEP, we are now working on assessing to what extent this principle of non-discrimination and openness can be extended to AI infrastructure, AI models, but also how AI curates and presents contents. On this, very shortly, we notably investigate 2 questions. The first one is how to preserve the openness of AI markets, notably through ensuring that plurality of economic players have access to key inputs necessary for LLM development, including data, computing resources, but also energy. And the second question we are also diving into is ensuring that we keep a diversity of content on the internet, knowing that when they use AI chatbots and response engine, end users only have access to one answer instead of hundreds of web pages. So we must ensure that generative AI is not just simply amplifying already dominant sources, but is open to smaller and independent content creators and innovators. That might mean in the future working on defining sector-wide frameworks or interconnection standards on fair contractual conditions, as it was done for IP interconnection. And to end, the goal is not, of course, to block innovation, but on the contrary, to make sure that innovation and AI are compatible with preserving internet as a common good.
Thank you very much, Sandrine, for these very excellent thoughts. And I think it's very good to see how you are illustrating that what has been done in terms of internet openness regulation or net neutrality debates over the past 15 years is precisely trying to enshrine into law the original philosophy of openness, transparency, and decentralization and plurality of the internet, and make sure that when what we can call gatekeepers or point of controls emerge, they behave correctly, and if necessary, a law protects the rights of the users, and the regulator oversees the laws to make sure that the obligations are implemented. Now, what is very difficult now is to understand who are the new gatekeepers and how to implement the law that maybe still does not even exist in these terms. So I would like to now give the floor to Renata Miele, who is the coordinator of the CGI in this moment, and CGI has been also leading the debate on net neutrality, internet openness, and now also on many AI issues in Brazil. So Renata, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca, and thank you all for inviting me for this session, especially because I believe we are establishing a continuity and we are deepening the debate we started in Riyadh when we discuss AI from a perspective of sovereignty and the empowerment of the Global South last year, and how to reduce the existing asymmetries in this field. And now we are talking about how to bridge the internet governance and principles to AI principles and governance. And to contribute to this session, I choose to look at the work we have done in CGI.br on principles for the internet, and try to reflect on what makes sense and what does not make sense when we're thinking about AI in a perspective of establishing a set of principles for development, implementation, and use of AI technologies, taking into account what Luca just said about the differences, the high economic concentration, the opacity of the systems, and taking into account also what Vint said, there are two different beasts. But despite these differences, I believe this exercise to trying to interlink these principles is interesting and is possible because in the case of the Decalogue of CGI.br, we worked hard to ensure that our Decalogue truly reflect principles that are general without being superficial. Instead, they constitute a concrete framework that should be observed and applied, developed, and adjusted according to each technology. And just to point very quickly, the principles we have in our Decalogue are freedom, privacy and human rights, democratic and collaborative governance, universality, diversity, innovation, inimputability, net neutrality, functionality, security and stability, standardization and interoperability, and legal and regulatory environment. These are our 10 principles. In this sense, I would like to start by looking at what is not covered when we are talking about AI in these 10 principles. And the first thing I see, and a lot of people are mentioning a lot, is transparency and explainability, because these two principles are very essential when we talk about AI, because it involves a series of procedures that are not in the same way when we are dealing with internet. Internet is open. Internet are decentralized. All the protocols are built in a very collaborative way. But this is not the case of AI. So AI system governance and deployment and development needs to ensure high levels of transparency, especially for the social impact assessment of this type of technology, as well as for the creation of compliance process that ensure other principles like accountability, fairness, and responsibility. In other words, we are discussing a series of specific principles for AI that were not necessarily conceived in the context of internet governance. In terms of CGI's Decalogue, I like to point some, which ones can be in some way interoperable with AI principles. In this case, I think, of course, freedom, human rights, democratic and collaborative governance, universality in terms of access and the benefits of the AI for all, diversity when talk about language, culture, the necessity of inclusion of all kind of expressions, also standardization and interoperability between and the various models. And of course, we need legal and regulatory environment for these systems. We can think that the perspective used for the internet governance is applicable to AI principles in context. From another perspective, principles like security needs to be addressed with another two other principles, safe and trustworthy, and ethical, I point another one. So they can be enhanced with discussion about impacts on rights like privacy and data protection. Finally, an important part of this exercise of evaluating internet governance principles and their possible alignment with AI governance principle is to identify what was conceived for the internet that is not applicable in the AI context. In these aspects, only to mention, because I don't have more time, I point the principles of net neutrality, because the proposal here is to preserve net neutrality in relation to telecommunications infrastructure, and this is not applicable to AI, and there is neutrality in the technology itself. AI is not neutral. And I think inimputability also is another principle that is not easily transferred to from the internet to AI, because here we have to understand the responsibility in the AI chain. So this is some thoughts I have to share in this beginning of this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Renata. And actually, you also bring into the picture something extremely relevant, I think, that for which the IGF is also an appropriate forum, being a UN forum. The fact that we have been debating this for 20 years. There are a lot of debates also going on in the global south about this since at least 20 years. But what we see in terms of mainstream debates and policy making and even construction of AI infrastructure, especially cloud infrastructure, is an enormous predominance of what we could call the global north. So it's very interesting to start to bring into the debate global south voices. We've started with Brazil. Now we are continuing with Ms. Adia Elminawi, that is here representing the African continent, which is an enormous responsibility. So please, Adia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and happy to be part of this very important discussion. So let me first start to highlight the similarities between AI and the internet that make the internet's core values well suited as a foundation for AI governance. So general purpose technologies have a wide impact on economic growth and productivity, and AI can be considered one of those general purpose technologies impacting economic growth maybe quicker than any other general purpose technology that has emerged in the past, such as steam engines, electrifications, computers. AI is driving revolutionary changes in all aspects of life, including healthcare, education, agriculture, finance, services, policies, and governance. By definition, AI isn't just one technology, but it's a constellation of them, including machine learning, natural language processing, and robotics that all work together. Similarly, the internet stands as another powerful general purpose technology that has fundamentally changed the way we live, work, and interact, enabling new ways of communication, education, services, provision, and conducting businesses. The internet infrastructure is foundational to artificial intelligence, enabling cloud services, including managing on-site data centers and real-time applications. In addition, many of the services and applications that are being delivered over the internet infrastructure are using AI to deliver better experiences, services, and products to users. So when it comes to Africa, the capabilities of African countries regarding AI vary significantly across the continent due to differences in the availability of resources, infrastructure, including reliable and efficient electricity, broadband connectivity, data infrastructure like data centers and cloud services, accesses to sets of quality data, AI-related education and skills, research and innovation, and investments. So last year in July 2024, the African Union Executive Council endorsed the African Union Continental AI Strategy. The Continental AI Strategy is considered pivotal to achieving the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goals. And likewise, the internet plays a critical role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. No poverty, good health and well-being, quality of education, digital industry innovation and infrastructure. Other relevant regulatory approaches around the globe include EU's AI Act, adopted in 2024, the Executive Order for Removing Barriers to American Leadership in AI in January 2025, sectoral oversight in the US, the UK Framework for AI Regulation, the 2023 G7's Guiding Principles and Code of Conduct, and China also has developed some rules. Egypt also has the had its second edition of the National Artificial Intelligence Strategy in 2025. So in all those strategies, we see some of the core principles that have shaped the internet, such as openness, interoperability, and neutrality, guiding various AI governance strategies. So the question now becomes, how do we translate those agreed principles and frameworks into actions? And in some cases, what do those principles in practical terms mean or look like? So let's look at openness and transparency. What does this mean?
Sorry, Hadia, may I ask you to wrap up in 30
Yes, sure.
seconds?
So that would be very quick. I'm almost done. So open access to research and requiring AI model, maybe it means open access to research and requiring AI models to include components of for full understanding and auditing. But what does ensuring transparent algorithms in practical terms mean? Is it realistic or even desirable to expect that all AI models be made fully open source? Given the amount of capital investment in these models, requiring complete openness could discourage investment in AI models, destroying a lot of economic value and hindering innovation. At the same time, transparency and openness raise some important ethical and security concerns. Is it truly responsible or logical to allow unrestricted access to tools that could be used to build weapons or plan harmful disruptive actions? We may need layered safeguards. AI algorithms on top of other AI algorithms to ensure responsible and secure use. So what alternative solutions can we consider? One possibility could be requiring all AI developers to implement robust safety guardrails and have these guardrails open source rather than the models themselves. In addition, AI developers could be required to publish the safety guardrails that they have put in place. I guess this is an open discussion. And with that, I would like to wrap up and thank you.
Thank you very much, Hadia. And on that, I think that I want to thank all the panelists for their insightful contribution. And now I want to invite our invited community members to comment on what they have heard. So you are also welcome to share your own views on the broader issues we have touched upon. And on that, I would start with Roxana Pardue. You have 5 minutes. Please start.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for not being able to join you in person. I would just like to start by saying that there is a flourishing discussion now around ethics and principles in AI governance. In fact, it's what we've seen developed over the last 5 or 6 years. It's a plethora of ethical standards and guidelines and values to adhere to. But the key difference with internet governance is the level of maturity in these discussions, and also the ability to integrate those values that are newly identified into technical, policy, and legal standards. What we've done in internet governance over the last 30 years is much more than identifying core values. We apply them, we've embedded them into core practices, and we are continuing to refine these practices day by day. So I think there are 4 key areas that require attention at this point in time, where we can bridge the internet governance debates and the AI governance discussions. First is the question of market concentration. Luca was already alluding to gatekeepers. How do we define them in this new space? Highly concentrated ownership of the technology, of the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. Second is the diversity and the equity in participation in engaging different stakeholders, but also stakeholders from parts of the world that are not equally represented. Thirdly, there is the hard-learned lesson of personal data collection, use, and misuse. We have more than 40 years of experience with that in the internet governance space, and we've placed emphasis on data minimization, to not collect more than what you need. This lesson does not seem to apply to AI. In fact, it's the opposite. Collect data even if you are not sure about its purpose currently. Machines might figure out a way to use that data in the future. Is the opposite of what we've been practicing in recent years in internet governance. And fourthly, and very much linked to these previous points, there's a timely discussion now around how to integrate some of these core values into technical standards. With AI, there seems to be a preference for unilateral standards, the giants developing their own standards, sharing them through APIs, versus globally negotiated standards where a broader community can contribute, and those voluntary standards could then be adopted by companies and by participants in those processes more broadly. So I think we need to zoom in on some of these ways of bringing those core values into practices, and it's very opportune to do that now at the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roxana. And I think that there are some interesting points that are emerging here. Also, something that I want to very briefly comment on, because it was raised before, is that we are discussing here how core internet values can apply to AI. And I think it's interesting to do this in joint venture with the Coalition on Net Neutrality, because net neutrality is the implementation of core internet values into law. And as any lawyer that has studied Montesquieu would tell you, what counts in the law is the spirit of the law, right? I remember 10 years ago writing an article on the spirit of the net, where I was mentioning precisely that net neutrality was the enshrining into law the spirit of the net, the core internet values, right? And so we now have to understand a way to translate this into an applicable way to AI. And I think that is the huge challenge we have here today. And I'm pretty sure that our friend Bill Drake knows how to solve this challenge. Please, the floor is yours.
Obviously, I do not. But thank you. Okay, well, first of all, I congratulate the organizers of this session on putting together an interesting concept. I mean, trying to figure out how you map internet properties and values into the AI space, I think, is definitely a worthwhile activity. As Roxana noted, it kind of builds on all the discussions at international level in recent years about ethics, whether in UNESCO and other kinds of places. And I think that, you know, it's worth carrying this forward. But I would start by noting just there's a few constraining factors, 3 in particular. First, conceptually, let's bear in mind, again, going back to what Vince said, we're talking different beasts. You know, we're not talking here about a relatively bounded set of network operators and so on. We're talking about a vast and diverse range of AI processes and services in an unlimited range of application areas from medicine to environment and beyond. So which internet properties will apply generally or in specific contexts simply can't be assumed. We need to do close investigation and mapping. And I think there's a great project there for somebody who wants to develop that matrix. I look forward to reading whoever does that first. There are reasons to wonder whether some of these things really do apply clearly. Renata suggested that net neutrality, for example, might not be so directly applicable. There's a lot of other challenges, I think, there intellectually. Secondly, of course, there's the material interests of the private actors involved. Luca referred to the concentration issues. It's nice to think about values, but I wouldn't expect all the US and Chinese companies that are involved in this space to join an AI engineering task force and hum their support for voluntary international standards. To the contrary, they've kind of demonstrated that they'll do pretty much anything to promote their interests at this phase, including sponsoring military parades for dear leaders in Washington and so on. So it's unclear how much they would embrace any kind of externally originated constructs like neutrality, openness, transparency, et cetera, that don't really fit well into their immediate profitability profile, and how well these things would apply to very large online platforms and search engines, et cetera. Again, real challenges there. And lastly, of course, the material interests of states. Net neutrality, of course, is verboten in the United States now. Applying it to AI, of course, would be too. Generally speaking, multilateral regulatory interventions are impossible to contemplate in the Trump era, at least for those of us who are in North America. And I'm not sure what China would sign on to in that context. So in principle, you would like to think, though, that transparency and openness with regard to governance processes, especially international governance processes, could be pursued. And there, you know, I would just like to flag a couple of quick points before I run out of time. Lessons from internet governance, I think, that are relevant. One, first, we have to be real clear about where there's an actual demand for international governance and regimes and the application of these kinds of values and so on. We simply can't just assume, because the technology is there and the issues are there, that there's a functional demand. You know, often people point to things and say, oh, there's some new phenomena, we must have governance arrangements. But very often, the demand for governance arrangements is not equally distributed across actors, and those highfalutin aspirations don't get fulfilled. So, you know, I mean, we used to talk about safety, right? There was a lot of international discussion around safety. Now suddenly safety is out the window, and we're all talking about, well, we want to promote innovation and investment. So, you know, it's easy to say that we have these kind of, this demand to do all these new, wonderful normative things, but in reality, you know, when push comes to shove, we have to look at where there's a real functional demand. Where do you actually need international governance, interoperability, or harmonization of rules? In the telecom space, if you look historically, right, radio frequency spectrum, we had to have non-interference. Telecom networks had to be interconnected and have standards to allow the networks to pass traffic between them. So there was a strong incentive for states to get on board and do something, even if they had different visions of how to do that and they could fight over it. What are those aspects of the AI process that absolutely require some kind of coordination or harmonization? It's not entirely clear, and I think we can't just assume that. Other last point that I'm going to run out of time is just to say, as somebody who was around 20 years ago and remembers all the fights over internet governance and what is internet governance and so on, we are in a liminal moment like we were 20 years ago, where people are not clear what is the phenomena, how do we define it, what does governance mean in this context, et cetera. This requires a great deal more thinking about when you're applying it to the specificities of the AI space. I think I hear a lot of these discussions in the UN where people seem to be just grafting constructs from other international policy environments onto AI and saying, well, we'll just apply the same rules that apply elsewhere. And this is like saying that we'll apply the rules from the telegraph to the telephone and from the telephone to television. And, every new technology, we're going to look at it through the lens of previous technologies. But often that doesn't work so well. My last point, and then I stop. Multilateral action, I'd be very careful in thinking about. I noticed that the G77 in China had, in a reaction to the co-facilitators stuff on the AI, is saying that they want binding international commitments coming out of the UN process, that they will not accept purely informal agreements coming out of the UN process. I look at what's going on in the AI space, I'm thinking, seriously, what kind of binding international agreements are we going to begin negotiating how in the United Nations in the near term? And if you set that up at the front end as the object that you're trying to drive towards, you can just see how difficult all this is going to become very quickly. So I probably went over 5 minutes, so I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to reflect. You packed an awful lot of information on that section, but we don't have enough time. So therefore, I directly go to Cheyenne. Cheyenne, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to attend this important discussion. I am from China Mobile, one of the world's largest telecom operators. So I'd like to share the practices and experiences from China Mobile to bridge internet and AI governance. In the age of internet, we continue to promote the development of the internet ecosystem towards fairness, transparency, and inclusiveness. This commitment is reflected in our efforts across infrastructure development, user rights protection, and bridging the digital divide. Firstly, in terms of infrastructure development, we strive to ensure equal access to and inclusive use of internet services. China Mobile's mobile and broadband networks now cover all villages across the country. We've also built the world's largest and most extensive 5G network. Second, when it comes to protecting users' rights and interests, we work actively to create a transparent and trustworthy online environment. We provide clear, user-friendly service mechanisms and have introduced quality management tools to ensure users' right to information and independent decision-making. For specific groups such as elderly and minors, we focus on fraud prevention, education, and offer customized services to build a safer and greener digital space. Third, to bridge the digital divide and support inclusive growth, we've implemented targeted solutions. For elder users, we offer dedicated discounts and have tailored our smart services to their needs. For minors in rural areas, our 5G Smart Education Cloud Network services are helping to reduce the gap in education resources between urban and rural communities. As the transition from the internet era to the age of AI, China Mobile is actively adapting its experience and capabilities to the evolving needs of AI governance. We're striving to build a digital ecosystem featuring universal access, decentralization, transparency, and inclusiveness. We are investing in AI infrastructure to promote resource sharing and encourage decentralized innovation, backed by our strong computing power, data resources, and product solutions such as large language models and AI development platforms. At the same time, we continually leverage AI capabilities to build a transparent and trustworthy digital environment, effectively safeguarding user rights. For instance, China Mobile applies AI-powered information detection technologies in scenarios like video calls and financial services to help users identify false or harmful content. Moreover, we are committed to ensuring that the benefits of AI are shared by all. For minors, we launched personalized education and immense education scenario interaction solutions. For the elderly, we offer AI-powered entertainment, health monitoring, and safety services. And for rural areas, Our smart village doctor system delivers quality health care to remote communities. That's all for my sharing. Thank you.
As everyone points over to me, thank you very much. Now we're going to open the floor for your input and for your feedback on what we've had so far. I'm the remote participation or online participation moderator as well, and there's been a really interesting debate going on online. I'm not sure how many of you have been following this. I was going to ask whether we could have the two main participants that were speaking back and forth online, Alejandro Pesanti and Vint Cerf as well, because Vint, of course, is always active both online and with us. So, and then we'll have, after those two, then we'll start with the queue also in the room. Yeah? All right, let's get going. Alejandro, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Thank you. I was making these points also in previous discussions of the Core Internet Values Dynamic Coalition. If you are trying to look at translating what the experience of governance from the internet to AI, to artificial intelligence, I think there's a few points that are valuable to take into account, and many of them have been made already, so I'm trying to just group them. First is you have to define pretty well what you want to govern, what branch of the enormous world of artificial intelligence you actually want to apply some governance. Otherwise, you'll have some serious ill effects. Using AI for molecular modeling, protein folding, and so forth, that kind of problem, or using it as a back office system for detecting fraud in credit cards and so forth, are very different beasts in turn. So it's very important not to regulate one of them, let's say, regulates with such generality that rules from one of them will impede progress in other ones where they are absolutely not necessary. Second, what I think is very important, and we learned this from internet governance, from 30 years of internet governance, is make sure you are governing the right thing in the following sense. What does AI, as the internet in turn, bring new to things that we already know? What rules do we already have that we can just apply or modify for taking into account AI? For example, we have purchasing rules, especially in governments, where the constraints that you have on systems that you can buy for government, like they cannot be discriminatory, they cannot be harmful, and so forth. So you can apply those rules instead of creating a whole new world. It's like medical devices, for example. You already have so many rules for automated medical devices. You can extend those to artificial intelligence, the harms and the consequences of the harms. Now, these will be different. They will be amplified. There's probability, there's uncertainty, but we know how to deal with that, and we just need to change the scale and a better understanding of these factors. Next, what do you expect to obtain from governance? Do you want more competition? Do you want a reduction of discrimination and bias? Do you want more respect for intellectual property? Do you want more access to global resources for the global south, and so forth? Because this will determine the institutional and organizational design. And next and most important, and this is something that a Net Mundial Plus 10 meeting, for example, does miss with other good that it has, is how do you actually bring these different stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders and how do you bring them to the table? If you want to regulate large language models provided over the internet for chatbots, like are the dominant aspect of public discussion these days, why would they come to the table? Why would OpenAI, Google, Meta, etc., not to speak about Mistral and certainly the providers in China and other countries which are operating under completely different sets of rules, why would they come together and agree to limit themselves in some way? Also to sit at the table with people who are their users or their clients, potentially their competitors if something rises from their innovation. And especially, how do you bring them together to put some money into the operation of the system, to agree to have a structure, to agree to have their hands tied in some extent? What has happened, for example, in internet governance is very different things for, let's say, the domain name system and fighting phishing and scams. For the domain name system, you had companies fearing that strong rules for competition would come from the US government, and they agreed finally to come together with civil society and the technical community, which is also a key point. The experts have always to be at the table. As the ICANN paper has stated very recently for intergovernance, the technical community is not one more participant, it's a pillar. And you need to know what the limitations and the capabilities of that technology are. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Okay, next, Vincerf.
First, I have to unmute. So thank you so much, Alex. I always enjoy your line of reasoning. Let me suggest a couple of small points. The first one is that with regard to regulation of AI-based applications, I think a focus of attention should be on risk to the users of those technologies and, of course, potential liability for the provider of those applications. So a high-risk application such as medical diagnosis or recommended medical treatment or maybe financial advice ought to have a high level of safety associated with it, which suggests that if there is regulation, the provider of the service has to show due diligence, that they have taken steps that are widely agreed to reduce risk for the user. So risk is probably a very important metric here. And concurrently, liability will be a very important metric for action by the providers of AI-based services. I think that another thing which is of significance is the provenance of the materials used to train these large language models, for example, and explainability, chain of reasoning, chain of thought, those sorts of things to help us understand the output that comes from interacting with these large language models. And finally, I mentioned this earlier, but let me reiterate that the agent-to-agent protocol and the model context protocols are there, I think, partly to make things work better, more reliably, but they might also be important for limiting liability. In other words, there's a motivation for implementing these things with great care and designing them with great care so that it's clear, for example, in a multi-agent interaction, which agents might be responsible for what outcomes. Again, something that relates to liability for parties who are offering these products and services. So I'll stop there. I hope that others who are participating in this will be able to elaborate on some of these ideas.
Thank you, Vin. Just one point. Earlier in the chat, you mentioned, I'm seeing here, indelible ways to identify sources of content used to train AI models. Could you explain a bit?
Yes, I was trying to refer to provenance here. The thing that people worry about is that the material used to train the model may be of uncertain origin. And if someone says, well, how can I rely on this model? How do I know what it was trained on? I think it should be possible to identify what the sources were in a way that is incontrovertible. You know, digitally signed documents or materials whose provenance can be established is important, because then we can go back and say to the parties providing those things or ask them questions about the verifiability of the material that's in that training data.
Okay, thanks very much for this, and apologies for the wait, but please over to the gentleman standing at the microphone, and please introduce yourself in your intervention. Thank you.
Yes, hi, thank you for the excellent panel. I'm Dominique Azelmassieu. I work for WCC, where, among other things, I oversee our work around AI and its impact on the web. So WCC is a place where a lot of web standards are being developed. I guess I wanted to make two remarks, one on scope and one maybe on incentives for governance, one of the topics that was brought up. In terms of scope, we are at the IGF, and it's been mentioned a number of times, AI is extremely broad. One, I think, useful way to segment the problem is to look at the intersection of AI and internet. And there are a number of those, like AI has been fed from a a lot of web content. A lot of web content is now being produced through AI. AI is starting, as Vint was describing, to be used as agents on the web and on the internet. So looking exactly at these intersections and what AI changes to the existing governance expectations and rules in these systems, I think is probably going to be more productive than trying to have a generic conversation about AI, because as a general purpose technology, that's too broad of a topic. And I guess it leads me to this question around what are the incentives for these AI systems operators to come at the table around this governance discussion. And I think at the end of the day, well, the internet, the web is a critical component of their strategy about both building their tools and distributing the tools. And they can only make that remain true if they don't impoverish the ecosystem to a point where there is no more content they can feed on, or no more services that could accept to reuse or integrate with the system. So at the end of the day, I think it's really a matter of making sure, in particular in this emerging agents architecture that Vint was describing, that we understand what are the expectations for these agents, learn from rules that already exist. For instance, in the web space, we have a number of very clear expectations as to what you ought to do if you're a browser, literally a user agent, and understanding how they apply to AI-based agent, I think is going to be hopefully very illuminating about what kind of governance we should put in place around that.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And the next person in line, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, sorry, my name is Andrew Campling. In this context, I'm an internet standards and internet governance enthusiast. To build on sort of Bill's comments, I probably wouldn't start from here either. But here we are, and we're probably too late to be somewhat pessimistic. But if I was going to look anywhere to start, it wouldn't be the internet. I'd probably look closely at lessons from social media specifically, where we've got, in my opinion, a small number of highly dominant players who are disinterested in collaborative multi-stakeholder initiatives unless they're commercially worthwhile to them. If we look to sort of the internet model and we try to collaborate, build a multi-stakeholder governance for model, I don't think there's a commercial imperative for the players to do that. It's far too easy to game the system and take a long time, and by the time something's agreed, it will be irrelevant. So if I was to start anywhere, I'd look closely at duty of care as a key sort of requirement, and also explore why we wouldn't apply the precautionary principle widely, and use those as the two foundational building blocks. I wouldn't start with internet governance. So apologies for the pessimism, but I think we have to be pragmatic and realistic where we are. Thank you.
I should say this is quite a British intervention. But okay, thank you so much. Pass it over to Luca, or should we go for the conclusions? Because there's only about 6 minutes.
I think we can go. We have 6 minutes. Do we have any other comments or questions in the room? I don't see any hands. We have exhausted the comments from the online participants. I think we can go for a round of very quick conclusions, like very prehistoric tweets of 240 characters.
We don't have time because we got to go now to Yek.
Well, Yekshan is the person.
Yeah,
Oh, Yekshan. Yeah, sorry. Then sorry. We have already Yekshan that as a chat GPT will distill all the knowledge in 5 minutes result.
Okay, and thank you very much for giving me the 5 minutes to make some comment. Actually, I'm from PNAI, the policy level of artificial intelligence, which is also the intersectional process of IGF. So it's very interesting to have the joint section between the PNAI and the DCs. Yeah, I found the discussion is really fascinating, and so my observation is that there's two observation Also based on the PNAI's past 3 years research on the AI governance. For example, we did a 2 report on liability and interoperability, all these big issues and environmental protections. So I think there's 2 issues I would like to make some comments. The first one is about the institutional setting, and because Bill asked how can we collaborate at the global level, and what are the initiative or interests. I think there's first of all, we know that there's a UN process going on in terms of the scientific panels and also global dialogues. So we probably give some opportunities and a little bit trust to them and hold on to see what are the outcome from the UN level. And secondly, I think from my experience, what really make a difference between the AI governance and internet governance or social media governance is that we learn from our past experience, especially social media's experience. So we have such a vibrant discussion, intervention, earlier intervention or precautionary principle, as we British said, and from different stakeholders, from civil society, from academia, and from the industry. So I think in that sense, we are much more precaution than the social media and the internet eras. So which probably will make a difference. And certainly, the second one is in terms of which area we should look at. From my experience and also the PNAS experience, I agree with Wings. First of all, is risk. Risk is very important, And secondly, the safety issues. And of course, liability, because liability is a mechanism we hold the AI developers and the deployments accountable. So that's very important, I think. The third one, of course, is interoperability. So when we talk about interoperability, it's not only about a principle, ethics, norms, but also standard, So the standard will play a significant role in regulating AI, and I'm very glad we see a lot of progress in terms of AI standard making. For example, at the EU level, there's a lot of the standard. So they're going to have a kind of the announcement of the use standard in terms of AI Act. So, but there's also huge progress of standard making in China in terms of safety issue or the ethical issue. So I think the AI standard will be the one of the very crucial area for us to regulate AI in the future. I think I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jake Chan. And there's 2 minutes left, I guess, to just ask any of our co-moderators on their reflections. I was going to say one tweet from each one of our participants, but I don't know if we can do it in the 2 minutes. Should we try?
One tweet? Yeah, why not?
Quick tweet. Okay, let's start with the table then, with the person the furthest to my right, which is your left. Bill Drake?
A message of hope in 20 seconds.
A message of hope in 20 seconds. Wow.
Or of disgrace, as you prefer.
I was going to say abandon all hope. All right. Well, I just echo again the point about being very clear about exactly what demand is there for what kind of governance over what kinds of processes. Too much of the discussion around these issues is just too generic and high level to be very meaningful when we get down to the real nitty-gritty of what's going on in different domains of AI development and application. And so we need a dose of realism there. But I like the idea of the mapping effort that you're trying to do, and I look forward to seeing you guys develop it more.
Thank you, Bill. Next, Wishing.
Okay, thank you. It's my first time to attend this kind of discussion, and it's very important to share my opinions and discuss with all of you. I hope I have another chance to continue to exchange our ideas with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hadia?
Regional and international strategies and cooperations should not be seen as conflicting with national sovereignties. National and international strategies, cooperations, and collaboration should go in parallel and hand in hand. They should support and strengthen the goal of one another. They need to be to have aligned objectives and implemented simultaneously.
Thank you, Hadia. Sandrine?
Yeah, so we can no longer think AI governance and internet governance as separate entities. As we noted today, the strong interlinks between LLMs and internet content and services. Thus, applying internet core principles to AI is not a whim or accessory. It is the only way to preserve the openness and richness of the internet we spend years to build, and we can and must act now to establish a multi-stakeholder approach with that in mind.
Thank you. Renata?
Just 3 words. How to transform these principles into technical standards. We talk about this, and I want to say we need oversight, agency, and regulation. And we need to remember that governance and regulation are 2 different things. And governance needs to be multi-stakeholder, and we need national regulations for AI systems.
Thank you. Roxana?
I'll just say that we need to walk the talk. So now that we've done this initial brainstorming session, I look forward to seeing what we can come up together in terms of bridging this gap between what we've learned in internet governance and where we're starting in AI discussions. This is not to say that everything applies, but we've learned a lot, and we shouldn't reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. And finally, Vint?
I think my summary here is very simple. We just have to make sure that when we build these systems, we take safety in mind for all of the users. That's going to take a concerted effort for all of us.
Thank you very much. And if anybody in the room is interested in continuing this discussion, which I hope you are after this session, then please come over to the stage and share your details with us. You can get onto the DC's mailing lists and continue the discussion and participate in future such work. Thank you.